Hi, Loulou in Brooklyn, and I'm Shireen in Brooklyn as well. Yeah,
Hi, good morning.
good morning. And I saw you last night at Saul Williams talk, which might be actually a good place to get started for us on
Yeah,
the idea of experimentation and resistance through poetics.
yeah, it was a wonderful talk. I really needed to hear everything that he said.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
What about poetics for you is and experimentation is a form of resistance and struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think my work a lot is about um like shattering definitions and shattering or unsettling language and unsettling definitions of or how we understand ourselves being defined by language. And so for me, poetics, right, like art, is a process of unsettling what we have been told we know. And I think kind of experimentation, being given language as something you're given when you're born, right? So, like being given language to experiment with what has been handed to us, I find and like what we're being told is as it is through language, um, is a process of like resisting world orders, right? Because I think like world orders use language and texts to define and like legitimize power. And so playing with that form itself, playing with language through poetics, through image, through metaphor, and then being like, what do I find here when I play is a process of like rejecting what has been handed to us as like truth or, you know,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this whole project started, it started, I guess today where we're at is that my idea of noise as a disassemblage is a response to the violence of all existing forms and of the violence of language. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's very much inspired by Etel Adnan's Arab Apocalypse, the blowing up of language, the guerrilla poetics.
Right.
That is also that also encompasses all senses and beyond, so it's sort of it's both an attunement to other you know forms of life and love
Mm-hmm.
and resistance, and also as you said, a rejection, a repurposing, a destruction, a shattering, and upsetting of the existing forms and languages that we have to move through. So I want to ask you now, this idea of poetics, how do you now take it to, you know, to the body, to movement and space?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I work with text a lot, being trained first and foremost as an actor, and so like text was the first like craft that I was given. Um, and I, yeah, I believe, or like my experience in working with text and language is that there's a limitation.
Hmm.
There's a limitation as to what can fully be expressed in word. Um, and I also, for me, I associate language and words with the mind, right? It's very like it's mind produced, and there's a different knowing. There's a different way of understanding the world by being connected to our bodies and listening to our bodies and knowing through our bodies. Um, and so for me, I guess when I think about my work and poetics and resistance through the body, it's like almost like rejecting knowledge that's produced from the mind, and which I see also as quite like an imperial way of seeing the world. So rejecting that way, um, and attuning to to what we know in our bodies that language cannot capture. Like what do we say? Like what are we feeling in the felt sense that is a way of knowing that is telling us actually no, this is wrong. This is unjust. And I know it not because somebody's telling me, but because I'm sensing it in my body. Um and I mean, I guess in the way that I think about movement and body in poetics is for me in my work specifically is that I'm very much interested also in like layering language and text and the body, and like what is the space in between that layering where we get to see something that we didn't see before, because we're in this space of the body, we're in this space of knowing, and we're in that space of knowing. And we when we collage them together, when we layer them together, what is the dissonance, exactly, the dissonance that exists, or the harmony that exists in between those spaces that allows us to that illuminates questions, answers about power, ultimately, about power, how we understand ourselves, how the world is constructed, the truths that we're told that are actually ultimately lies, you know? Yeah,
Yeah, it's about resisting domination and control.
exactly. Yeah,
And you also
exactly.
have a lot of sound in your work, which I love because it's all noisy and distorted. Good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Sound is like, I have like a very complicated relationship to sound, I think. I have like a neurological disorder that makes me very sensitive to noise, to sound in general. And so uh and I spend a lot of my everyday kind of like making sure that I'm in a habitat that is like okay for me to just like kind of like function and not be in kind of like a fight or flight state. Um, but then in my work, it's like I want to make it the like noisiest, loudest, like most like it like I don't know, just mesh of sound ever, you know? Um yeah, it's like something about for me, like when I think about sound a lot in my work, it's very much about discomfort. Like, how am I creating a space of discomfort for the audience where they, yeah, where they are, or yeah, how is sound creating a place where the audience can feel a sense of discomfort in their environment? Because for me, I very much am thinking about how do I unsettle the audience? How am I constantly working to unsettle the audience? And that is like what I think my art is in service to. Like not creating something that the audience can consume and feel really good about themselves and then leave, but really like how I want the audience to feel uncomfortable. I want them to feel uncomfortable in themselves. I don't really want anybody leaving like necessarily feeling empowered. I want people to feel a little bit almost like
Guilty.
guilty, yeah, you know, a little bit guilty, or like, you know, like okay,
Complicit.
I am complicit, I am accountable
Mm.
here. And I think no, for me, when I approach sound in my work, it's very much about with that intention, yeah.
I was thinking about the Palestinian scholar Nadira Shalhoub-Kevorkian. She has a concept
Mm,
called occupation of the senses. And
mm,
what she's arguing for is to incorporate these sensorial assaults into legal language and legal documents about genocide, about domination, in occupied Palestine, and all of these forms of constant, just yeah, assault, what,
right,
so it's not just bombs, it's just all the noise, the sound of tanks, the sound of, the dome, and so on. And I think that's so interesting in terms of what then we do as artists with this sonic assault, which is really a multisensorial assault. And
completely.
how do we sort of alchemize it, repurpose it, and how does that happen? And then how do we transform it?
Definitely. And I think I've been like struggling a lot lately with understanding like what is the role of the artist right now. Um, to be honest, like having maybe lost a sense of conviction that there's like an importance of art in this moment. Um, but at the same time, yeah, I do believe that there is like always purpose in trying to uh, create from what to create from what is destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that is like a worthwhile attempt in being alive.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are given this life, and that is like a worthwhile way of using the life that we have been offered. Yeah, so I'm very moved by that premise, and then also thinking about, yeah, what is the artist's role in taking that constant uh, assault on the senses and trying to create new life from
Yeah.
something that is like meant to destroy you. Yeah,
And also attack the existing structures through that sort of magical noise
of course. Yeah,
and infiltrate. And I was thinking too, beyond, your own body and your own space, how you're echoing the ravages in Palestine. How you're,
mm,
for example, this occupation of the senses that Nadira talks about, it really radiates. I mean, it really, it's global,
yeah,
and it's interconnected. These assaults are interconnected. And so how from Brooklyn you're responding to and echoing this suffering, this maiming, this death, through your body.
yeah. I think it's interesting. I I don't know if I would say that that's what I'm trying to do, because I think I'm very much aware, or I try to be very aware of my positionality as like a Palestinian in diaspora who is not living under occupation and not living under genocide. And I, so in some ways, I don't believe that it's my role to like express through my body the pain that my people are experiencing on the ground. Particularly being in the belly of the beast, particularly being in the US. Um, yeah, I would say that like I don't see that as my role. And like I'm also wary of artists that are taking up that role now. Or I'm wary of that decision. Um, it's one thing to be processing our own grief, but not to be translating the grief of others, I would say. Um, and yeah, so I guess I would say that like I don't know if I see that necessarily as or it's not what I'm trying to do, but what I am trying to do in terms of responding to the genocide is really um, to hold the to hold the U.S. Public accountable through my body and through uh, performance. In like understanding like what is your role in this destruction? What is my role in this destruction? And like I am not going to be a canvas, like my body is not going to be a canvas for you to process your own grief. It's going to, or your yeah, your own grief. But it like that's not what I am doing for you. That's not what the Palestinian people in Gaza are doing for me or for you, right? it's really about you finding yourself in this. And my certain what I'm trying to do is like my body's trying to give you back to yourself so you can find your responsibility in this and find like what you need to do to make this stop, you know? Um yeah, so that was like a really like long roundabout way of trying to answer your question, but yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's totally clear because at the end of the day, we're still in a position of privilege here where we're not living under the bombs. And I love that, you know, you acknowledge that you have this clarity about your position. And the fact that we still have access to stages, you know, we still have access to audiences, we still have, we are more or less able-bodied and um, I really appreciate that. And also, I'm trying to sort of push for a shattering too of
Mm,
subjectivity, of
mhm,
individuation, of
totally.
separation. And the fact that this attunement means that we are also um, profoundly connected um, to the strife, to the struggle of not just, you know, our people, but, you know, all people living in injustice. And I love that you have this sense of infusing action. And I found that a lot of these guerrilla poetics that I was studying,
Mhm,
there was really a sense of, okay, art needs to lead to action, or art needs to be implicated within action. There's no separation. Art is action. A lot of the artists I studied and I continue to study are out there on the streets,
mm.
protesting, sabotaging, disrupting. So actually, I'd like to ask you about that in any way you'd like to respond.
Yeah, um, yeah, I mean, going back to this to what I said earlier about feeling almost like at a loss for what art can do in this moment. And I do believe, as you're saying, like we have access to stages, we have access to audiences. So art has to be about moving audiences into action. Um, and like for me, I really don't want to create a premise in my work where people come to see a show by a Palestinian and they feel like they've done their duty. I'm just like, I that is not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to resolve you, absolve you in any way, right? Um and I do see my art as a form of activism, of organizing, of like trying to share analysis, right, on power, on, yeah, societal structures um, that need to be dismantled, you know? And so I believe that's what activism is ultimately, is like, how are we sharing analysis? How are we sharing an understanding that we see, that we hope others can identify with and see their own stake in that. Um, yeah, so my work, like as an artist, as an educator, as an organizer, like all of these things are kind of, it's there's there isn't a fine line for me, because they all come from the same, like, uh, um, the same impulse or the same desire or the same uh, search for, um, like, dismantling oppressive systems.
Yeah,
Um,
like
yeah.
to burn it down. So I was thinking because I love reggae, and a lot of reggae is about burning down Babylon. And I woke
Mm,
up thinking about, okay, just remembering that this is the assignment, you know,
yeah.
this is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me it's also very much about um you know, how are we like burning ourselves down? You know, that like we like what are we willing to give, to lose, to unsettle within ourselves, um to in service of something larger than us, in service of something that is for the collective and ultimately then for us as well. um yeah, and that's, I guess, what I hope to impart, right, to audiences is like, what are you willing to give here? Who are you? Who do you think you are? Who are you actually? And what are you willing to do about it? Yeah.
It's a good like shot of truth.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I guess that's it true. Like what, right, what we were talking about the body earlier, and knowing from the body, and just like capitalism, like its main goal, imperialism, its main or one of its main goals is to separate us from ourselves, you know,
Mhm.
like from our bodies, from it's always about like gratification, reaching for the next thing. Like we are not here, we are not present. Especially living in New York under the conditions that we live in, you know, and just like what it means to live in this city, what it means to move through this city. Like in order to survive, capitalism, I think we gain a separate, we lose a connection to ourselves. We become separated from our bodies. Um, and so yeah, it is also a process of like, okay, how do we come back to ourselves to really see like what is here, what am I have I not been looking at, what have I not refusing to see, or what have I been invested in over there when really I need to be questioning what's like right here.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was thinking too about, for me, the idea of noise is also shattering gender, so it's a gender noise.
Mm,
And again, shattering the body in many different ways. And I was wondering for you, how do you play with this idea of gender, particularly with dance having such, I mean, Western dance having such a heavy sort of racist, sexist, lineage, and also this pressure to entertain, as you said, please provide pleasure. And so, how do you play with all these, with that the perversion of that gaze, and also with this question of objection, feminist
yeah,
objection, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think about, well, yeah, there's like, I guess there's like multiple ways I want to answer this. I guess first, for me, again, like thinking about my positionality, I'm also, you know, what that means is also thinking about like what is the body I have been given, right? Or like what do I currently have to use at my disposal, essentially. Um, and for me, I'm super like I in a lot of my work, I'm very interested in using, in like setting up a premise where there is a gaze of uh like the erotic, a gaze that is like about desire, that is about pleasure, that is about teasing. And I like to set that up like hyper performance of femininity, what we understand is like femness. So a hyper performance of femness that is like full, like often folded into what we understand about like the erotic pleasure, you know. Um, and and then I like to kind of like catch the audience in that. So I set it up. So I'm like, yes, you are desiring my body. I'm creating a position where I know I am structuring your gaze, and now I'm going to turn the gaze back on you. And I'm going to catch you desiring me, and I'm not going to either. I'm not going to let you have it, or I'm going to. Uh, yeah, I'm not going to let you have it. Maybe it's like I'm not going to let you like climax. I'm not going to let you have
There's
the
no
fullest.
enjoyment.
There's
It's
no
not about,
enjoyment.
right.
Right. It's not about enjoyment. It's yeah, and like speaking directly to that mm, desire consumption of the body. Um so trying to like catch that as it's happening, and for me, I guess I'm thinking about that a lot in terms of like power again, right? So knowing, okay, like I know how I am being defined, and I'm going to play into that definition until in order to then take the power back, in order to then like wield the power for myself. Um, I'm kind of getting lost in my thoughts a little bit, but uh,
I think it's really clear to me. So I was wondering, what would it mean to queer
mm,
dance?
mm, yeah, yeah. So I guess um, yeah, what would it mean to queer dance? I mean, it's interesting because I don't really identify as like a dancer so much. So I'm
Yeah, I
like,
was thinking
you
that
know,
maybe it's not even dance at
dance.
this
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, what I really, it's interesting because in some ways, I can't answer this question without also thinking about myself as a Palestinian. Like the two things, like in some ways, can never ultimately be separated, particularly when it comes to my art, because that's what my art is about. Um, and so I think for me, like I am very interested in spaces of like slippage of definition, right? Where we're pointing to something and we're saying, oh, this is like femme, this is straight, this is right. And then all of a sudden it like flips, and it's not what you expect. It's not, or like what you assume to be femme is something else. So you're trying to grasp it as being that, and then it becomes a different kind of expression. Um, and so I think for me, that's ultimately what it is to queer something, is to reject definability, reject uh, uh, um, like the ability to be named as something. And and that's what I try to explore in my work. And I think specifically also it relates to how I understand like being a Palestinian and what like Palestinian resistance can look like, where we're refusing to be defined by anybody else but ourselves, right? Um, and we're refusing to be legible, right? We're refusing to be legible, and I see that as like just like a very queer mode of being. Or I am a Palestinian and refusing to be legible, and I see that as like a very queer way of existing in the world. Um, yeah, and refusing the definitions that have been put on us, right? Um, so it's not really exactly answering your question about like how do we queer dance, but for me, I guess it's like uh, I'm very interested in like working from a place of like what we think we know, and or like what I think the audience thinks they know, and then it morphs in front of your eyes into something else.
Yeah, I
And I
was
see
thinking
that as
about queerness as deformation as well. I
mm,
mean, and
yeah,
excess.
and excess totally also, and excess. Um, yeah, excess and just uh like pleasure for pleasure's sake. Uh, as well. Just like, mm, yeah, um,
Right, because I
yeah,
was thinking it's also resisting erasure. I mean,
exactly.
not just dehumanization, but actual genocide.
Yeah,
It's a claiming that you are here, that, on
yeah,
the, yeah.
and but I do think also that it's like it for me. I'm I'm in some ways I'm less interested in this idea of like claiming I'm here, and like I'm taking up space, but it's actually uh like I'm here when I choose to be here, and I'm not here when when I choose not to be here. It's like a choice of when I like of also being unseen, and it's a and um because for me I'm very interested in probing this idea of like when I say that I'm here, it also means that there's like the possibility of being captured, and I'm very interested in what it what it looks like to like slip away from capture. And so in definition terms, it's like, okay, well, actually I can't be defined because that means then I can't be captured. Yeah.
Totally. Because the gaze is also a violent gaze, and a gaze of seeing is also surveillance and control and tracking, and especially with these drone technologies,
Yeah, exactly.
you're
Exactly.
a
And
target. I mean, not you personally necessarily, but we're all targets, really.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, of course, yeah, we are all targets. Um and so yeah, having control on over when we are seen or not seen. Uh and on whose terms, on my own terms, you know um yeah, and of course I'm speaking like in a metaphorical way, but um yeah, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I kind of like want to say along these lines.
I wanted to ask actually about
mm,
your early, I mean, you're highly theoretically educated. You have, such really impressive, degrees, and you've written about such important topics. And I was wondering also, theoretically and artistically, what were your early influences?
mm,
You also come from a mixed background, so who were some artists that um, you were looking at early on, or even now, you find yourself coming back to. I mean, I talk to Etel Adnan in my head. I talk to Fred Moulton in my head a lot. You know, I talk to Jess Beerpoor in my head. Like, there's these people I'm in dialogue with, dead or
mm,
alive.
mm,
Um, and I'm
mm.
sure you have some of these people too.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually so interesting. I think I came to theory when I first, I guess, got to college, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe that this exists. Like that people are putting like people are conceptualizing of the world in these ways. And yeah, just like really being moved, by what people are able to put language to, in a way of things that are so complex, but really breaking it down. Um, yeah, so when I think about myself as like a baby queer, kind of being introduced to uh, theory, I mean, like the first people that come to mind are like, yeah, of course, I was reading like Judith Butler and Frantz Fanon and Foucault and Sarah Ahmed and um yeah, and I used to be very interested in like how do you take theory and put it up on its feet? Like how do you take theory and put it into performance? Like what does it mean to take this theoretical idea and or Edward Said and like Orientalism. Like I feel like the first half of my all the work that I did for like 8 years was kind of about Orientalism. Um,
I had dinner with Mariam Said last night. It was very, very wonderful.
oh,
I talk to her all the time, and I always like just share my griefs about how corrupt everything is with her. And
yeah.
so she's one of the people I dialogue with
Mm,
too.
mm,
So I totally yeah, I can totally relate. I think we all do. I mean, they really created languages that made us see the radically change, revolutionize the way we see the world.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think a lot of my own grief, I suppose, is also that I'm only able to access works like in English, and like the world of Arab theory that exists, or theory in Arabic that exists, that I don't access because of that, and until they're translated, is like a whole other thing as well. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I've taken a little bit of a step back from engaging with theory, and not in an intentional way, but just because my brain feels so overloaded that I don't even know how to like read anymore. And so I want to be in dialogue more with theory, especially in the work that I'm developing now. And it like is going to take an intentional effort to kind of return to it, because right now I can hardly make it through like a short story that's like about nothing in particular. um you know um so I guess that's like a real thing as well, that I noticed that my attention, my ability to hold information since the beginning of the genocide has really shifted. um
And how about
yeah.
performance artists or artists, other artists who
Mm,
continue to influence you?
yeah. um I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm like the biggest fangirl of Zandra Ibarra, who's a artist based in the Bay. Um, yeah, who I'm just like, wow, if I could ever have a conversation with you, I would be in heaven. Um, um, I yeah, I mean, it's like interesting. Is like, is it? I think I'm also like very inspired by just like the artists that I'm in community with. Like my own people that I know in New York City or in Europe, like my community, or the folks that like inspire me the most. And yeah, I don't know, like now, I mean, and Larissa Sansur is not a performance artist, but I think the case is that I'm actually quite inspired by art that is not performance. Like that is actually what uh feeds me more, is like writing, visual art. I'm like, that is the thing that then I'm like, ooh, how do I translate that into performance, into movement? How are we like, we're saying the same thing, but we're doing it through such different mediums. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And also for me, it's a sort of a shattering of these divisions between media because Larissa
Totally.
has, like this whole piece about an opera singer, and your work is very sculptural as well.
Mhm.
And your texts are so powerful. I really love your writing so much. And by the way, I want to tell people before we say goodbye that
Uh,
one of your pieces is featured on our Noise zine, which we're launching on Monday, and it's called "You Need Me." The text is so incredible, and also just the
mm,
visuals. I mean, we've been talking about a lot about the body and skin, and so I feel like even if people could, um, view this video, they'll have a deeper understanding of what we talked
mm.
about today. And then you have also ongoing work that maybe you'd like to share about, that people could learn more about.
Yeah. Well, I have one work that I've been developing now for several years, and I'm still like in the iterative process about it. It's called "There Are No Words." There are no words, so may it be the end. And it's yeah. I mean, I right now I'm very interested in thinking about like the Zionist military industry. Um, and the video "You Need Me" is also in some ways about that, but in a more of like an abstracted way. Um, and yeah, I don't know when I'll be sharing it again in New York, but I have the opportunities to share it in different places in the coming year. Um, and yeah, I mean, I mean, just to share a little bit about it, I'm thinking about I'm thinking about like the Zionist military industry, kind of like the export of counterterror expertise, um, and really the kind of like the identity of the Zionist state being grounded in the fact of like being like the identity of the Zionist state is constructed around the idea of like Palestinian as terrorist. And so once that kind of definition crumbles, the Zionist state, the definition, the identity of the Zionist state can no longer hold up. Um, so I'm very interested in that dynamic. And this piece is thinking about again like language, like the like what it means to name something as something, and how do we unsettle that definition? Uh, yeah.
So before we leave, I would love for you to share a little bit those last lines from that piece where you talk about this is the
Mm,
end. I thought it was so moving, and so I'd like you to sort of tell us a few, um, maybe tell us a little bit about these lines and also why you were thinking about that.
yeah, thank you for that question. I began working on the piece before the genocide. And then the genocide started, and I was like, oh, wow, like this doesn't live in the same way anymore. And I could not show the piece in the same way, and there needs to be more here. And then, yeah, I mean, going back to what we were talking about with like what I really believe in about like we have to destroy ourselves. I think that this moment, witnessing this genocide, um, requires that we and what we understand of ourselves and our lives, like nothing can be the same from this point forward. And so we are responsible, uh, or we are responsible to let everything that we know go. Like it has to be the end of the way that we understand everything and the way that we understand ourselves, because there's no other way to move forward after this. And by we, I mean those that are in the heart of empire, those that are in the global north, that are complicit. And so those lines are very much about like anything that we've understood no longer exists. We can longer let it exist. We have to let it end. We cannot continue to have desire and love and basic things like shadow and light and sound and like our bodies, that it all has to go, and we have to, yeah, we have to come back to ourselves in that absence and see what is there to move forward. um so that's what those lines are about, and I'm aware that like yeah, it like feel I'm aware, I'm talking like we're in the moment of a genocide and I'm talking about the end of things, right? And this is not about the end of Palestine. It's not about the end of Palestinian people. It's about the end of us in the global north in our positions that uh, that are living under relative safety with relative, with privileges that we need to be over in the ways that we in the systems that we live in the way that we understand ourselves, and we need, like, that is our responsibility in this moment. Yeah.
Thank you so
Does that make
much,
sense?
Loulou.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's the end of white supremacist cis hetero patriarchy.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for those thoughts, Loulou. It was such a pleasure.
Thank
And
you
more
for
soon,
having me.
more
Yes, I
soon,
will see
inshallah.
you, inshallah.
Bausit.
Yeah.
See you on Monday.
Bye.
Bye bye.